that are happening in the Special Military Operations Zone. I'm talking about what happened in the wake of long-range Western weapons being used in the Special Military Operations Zone. As a result of the escalation, the United States and their NATO allies said that they give their permission to use long-range weapons against targets inside Russia. Experts know fully well, and the Russian side has underscored this time and again, that using such weapons without the direct involvement of military operators from manufacturing countries is impossible. On November the 19th, 6 ATACMS missiles manufactured in the US were used, and on the 21st, a combined attack using Storm Shadow manufactured in the UK and missiles manufactured in the US were used to attack missile targets in the Bryansk and Kursk regions of the Russian Federation. Starting from that point, as we have underscored many times, the regional conflict in Ukraine, provoked by the West, acquired a global character. Our anti-missile systems countered those attacks. As a result, the targets and objectives set by the enemy were not achieved. The fire and the ammunition storage in the Bryansk region, as a result of fragments of ATACMS missiles falling, has been contained. No victims. In the Kursk region, one of the command and control centers of our Sever group was attacked. As a result of the attack and the countermeasures, there have been people wounded and killed, and those who were involved in servicing these facilities, those who were members of the command have not been hit by the attack and are now continuing their operation to remove the enemy from the Kursk region. I repeat, the use of such weapons cannot change the course of the special military operation. Our military is successfully advancing along the entire line of contact, and all the objectives that we set before ourselves will be met. As a response to the use of US and UK manufactured weapons, the Russian forces have carried out a combined strike on one of the military-industrial facilities in Ukraine. And this included the test of a novel intermediate-range Russian missile system. A ballistic missile with a non-nuclear hypersonic payload was used. The test was carried out successfully. The objectives of the launch have been met. One of the largest and well-known industrial centers that is known since the Soviet times in the Dnieper region, which is known and to be involved in enemy production, was hit. And further plans are being made in Europe and the Asia-Pacific to deploy weapons and missiles. And we believe it is a mistake on the part of the United States to destroy the system that was established by the Missile Treaty in 2019. We see that the United States and their allies are now considering and has successfully tested their capabilities to deploy advanced missile systems in different parts of the world. And their exercises routinely include the use of such weapons. Russia has unilaterally refused to deploy intermediate and small-range missiles until we see similar weapons deployed by the United States in a region of the world. The use of the novel system, which was essentially an operational test, was carried out in response to the decisions made by the United States and their allies. And the further actions will be considered and decided based on what we see from them. The further course of action will be determined based on the threats to the security of the Russian Federation. We believe that we have the right to use our weapons against military facilities of countries who allow their weapons to be used against ours. And in case of an escalation, we will act as decisively in a mirror fashion. The ruling elites of the countries are nurturing plans to use their military contingents against Russia should be warned. When choosing measures to be used in response, such as the use of systems that was tested recently in Ukraine, will certainly include warnings to civilians to clear the zones that will be targeted, and we will certainly do this in a transparent fashion. And we do not have any fears that it will reduce the effectiveness of those systems, because there is no way to counteract a missile that flies at 10 Mach, which is 2.5 to 3 kilometers per second. Existing anti-missile systems and the anti-missile systems deployed by the United States and Europe cannot intercept such missiles. It is impossible. So, once again, it is not Russia, but the United States who have destroyed the system of international security. And they are trying to preserve their hegemony and stoking a global conflict. We have always preferred, and we still prefer, to resolve our disagreements using peaceful means, but we are prepared for any scenario, and if anyone has any doubts, they shouldn't. There will always be a response.
From breaking news, detailed analysis, in-depth interviews and explainers, follow the Times of India. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like our videos.
We're going to war. We are going to war. What do we think so far? We all know this could have been avoided 3-4 years ago. We didn't have these conflicts.
After 1,001 days of war, Ukraine says it will never submit to Russian occupiers, while Moscow approves the use of nuclear weapons. Firing American-made long-range missiles into Russia for the first time, Kiev is stepping up its defense at what could be a frightening cost. As the U.S. approves Ukraine's use of more American weapons, President Putin greenlights using nuclear weapons against non-nuclear states. After almost 3 years, is this conflict entering a dangerous new phase? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is the war in Ukraine. To mark the 1,000th day of conflict between Russia and Ukraine, each side again vowed to defeat the other. That wasn't where most of the world hoped the two would be at this point, signifying no clear end to a war that's now escalating toward the use of nuclear weapons. The U.S. has not only given Kiev permission to use American missiles on Russian soil, it's also approved anti-personnel mines. And for Moscow, that reconfirms their argument that NATO has actually entered the war, clearing the way for Russian nuclear weapons to be used on Ukraine. So is this just rhetoric, or has the conflict just taken a highly volatile step toward a wider war? Here's a look.
The Russia-Ukraine war is entering a dangerous new phase. On Monday night, Kyiv launched its most contentious strikes yet, hitting deep into Russian territory with US-supplied ATACMS missiles. Moscow has warned this escalation could have dire consequences. The strikes, which targeted ammunition depots and critical infrastructure, have rattled the Kremlin.
The fact that ATACMS was used repeatedly in the Bryansk region tonight, of course it is a signal that they want to escalate the conflict. And it is impossible to use these high-tech missiles without the Americans. Putin has said this many times.
On the same day, Russia responded by lowering the threshold for its nuclear doctrine. President Putin now reserves the right to use nuclear weapons in response to a broader range of conventional attacks on its territory. And the escalation doesn't stop there. Moscow has received reinforcements. It's expected that there are now at least 10,000 North Korean troops in Russia preparing to help retake territory in the Kursk region lost to Ukraine in August.
It has been confirmed that about 11,000 North Korean troops were moved and deployed to Kursk around late October after completing on-site adaptation training in northeastern Russia. It is confirmed that they are currently deployed to Russia's Airborne Brigade or Marines to receive tactical training and drone response training, and some have participated in the war.
This could open the door for a broader offensive, stretching Ukraine's already fragile defenses in the eastern Donbass region. And then there's Donald Trump. His inauguration in January has Kyiv trying to guess what comes next. Trump has promised to end the war quickly, which could mean cutting aid to Ukraine unless it cedes occupied territories.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office shortly after we win the presidency, we win, all of us together are going to win, I will have the horrible war between Russia and Ukraine settled. I know them both. I will get it settled.
And Europe faces a critical choice. Will it step up military and financial support to fill the gap if the US steps back? Or will it risk leaving Ukraine to face Russia alone in a war it's bound to lose? From missiles to reinforcements and now nuclear posturing, Ukraine's fight is far from over. With shifting alliances and global stakes, the more than 1,000-day war is barreling towards a very uncertain and dangerous future.
Now, on Wednesday, the U.S. and several European embassies in Kiev closed due to threats of a significant attack. And China's foreign ministry stepped in, asking Russia to exercise restraint and calm. So are we witnessing a real escalation or more of the saber-rattling and rhetoric that's characterized much of the last 3 years? Well, joining me now to debate that and more are from Kiev, Director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative, Peter Zalmayev. From Moscow, former Russian diplomat, Vyacheslav Matusov. And from Washington, Eurasia political analyst, Jason J. Smart. Thanks all so much for being with me. Peter, I'll begin with you because you are obviously in Ukraine. Your military is saying now that it has repelled a Russian air attack on Kiev, but you have embassies closing. You have Russia threatening to go nuclear again. So how seriously are you taking all of this right now? Does it feel like something is on the precipice?
Well, the Kremlin certainly wants to feel that something is on the precipice. You know, I don't think we're feeling anything that would be substantially different from everything we've experienced so far. Vladimir Putin is once again using nuclear blackmail to try to ward off anyone and everyone who wants to continue supporting Ukraine. I believe that, once again, as evidence that this is part, for the course and much of the same, is Vladimir Putin really does not need any sort of official change to the nuclear doctrine. He rules his country by diktat, by fiat. He doesn't need any of this. This is obviously a message for the outside world. Once again, Ukraine had been in the business of hitting Russian targets deep inside Russia's territory for quite some time using its own locally produced drones, and that hasn't set off any of these recent threats. So why now? You see, so a lot is very unclear. But once again, I would caution against falling prey all too easily to Putin's, renewed nuclear blackmail.
Okay, let me ask Vyacheslav if that's what you think it is. Is it nuclear blackmail? I mean, would Russia really employ its nuclear arsenal in this war?
Well, I don't think that Russian-American relations will develop in future and in the near future and after arriving to the presidency, Donald Trump will be endangered by the using by Russia any threats, any not nuclear only, but also for outside military program that is proclaimed today. So I don't think that Russia will ignore international law. First of all, that all this Russian doctrine on nuclear doctrine is restricted by international law and their obligations to the United Nations Declaration and to our relations with the West as a whole. I don't think that this is joke about the nuclear bomb. It is not nowadays. I have any reasons. Russia Russia begins using such kind of weapon of mass destruction. I exclude it absolutely.
Okay, well, let me ask Jason what you think. I mean, how concerned are you? And do you think it was actually necessary to close the embassies that have shut down?
Well, I think that the embassies were closed not due to fear of a nuclear strike, closed simply due to the fact that it's probably going to be a large strike of Shaheeds, the Iranian drones, as well as with missiles that Russia typically fires on Ukraine, including Kyiv, and is used to kill the civilian population around the country. So I think it's due to that, not nuclear. I don't think there's any serious chance that Russia would use nuclear weapons. I think that's about zero. So I can say I'm totally unconcerned by that.
It's interesting, though, because you're kind of saying then they're making sort of empty threats. But, you know, we heard similar talk in the lead up to the invasion of Ukraine that Putin would never do that. He'd never go that far. And look where we are 3 years later.
Well, this is true, but the difference is that Vladimir Putin, during the course of this war, as well as his proxies, have said about 8 times they've used nuclear saber rattling. At no point have they actually used them or deployed the weapons beyond where they're usually kept. So it's very common for Russia to make these threats. It's not uncommon by any means. And they correctly understand that Western policymakers are very scared of those words. And so it's effective as the people like Jake Sullivan in the White House worry about escalation. But at the end of the day, I just see absolutely no evidence to think that anything will come of this. Russia would have far more to lose than to potentially gain, especially since its major allies, such as China, has said that it will not support Russia any longer should it use something like nuclear weapons.
Okay. I mean, Peter, does that give Ukrainians any sense of relief knowing that China, being the power that it is, has stepped up and said, hey, we're drawing this line as well?
Well, it has given Ukraine some relief all along, and this, as a matter of fact, happened during the summit in Uzbekistan, I believe the first summer of war, meaning the summer of 2022. The ancient city of Samarkand, and that's where Xi Jinping actually talked about extending security guarantees to members of the Central Asia community, countries like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, and that was the one serious hint at that same meeting. Where Xi Jinping dropped about the use of nuclear weapons being completely out of the question, completely irresponsible. Andrea, I would actually add something to that point. While that is a relief, what is not a relief to Ukrainians is the fact that the incoming administration of the U.S. President, Donald Trump, may actually be using this recent nuclear rhetoric by Vladimir Putin as an excuse to try to bring Ukraine as soon as possible, as quickly as possible, to the negotiating table. Members of his team, including J.D. Vance and most recently Mike Waltz, who has been selected as his national security advisor, have actually said that, and criticized this decision as irresponsible. Donald Trump's son, Don Jr., called these people behind this decision at the administration, probably including President himself, Joe Biden, as imbeciles. I mean, you couldn't put it in any starker terms than that. So once again, folks at the Trump administration continue talking about trying to.
It seems we've lost Peter's connection. Let's try to rectify that, and we'll come back to him at a later point. Let me check in with Vyacheslav then, because picking up on what Peter was saying and the incoming Trump administration, President Trump has made a lot of how influential he can be and effectively finish this war, he's said, even within 24 hours. I mean, what is Russia making of that? How eager is Russian leadership to work with Donald Trump? And could he be just effectively underestimating really the complexity of this war in saying what he said?
Okay. Russia is not initiated any problems with the United States because Russian behavior, Russian decision to begin military action in Ukraine is based on their interest in preserve of national security. Because if national security will be guaranteed, I don't think that any other aspirations Russian command, Russian government, Russian president have. Because we don't have any intention to join Ukraine on the spread Russian territory. No, it's not territorial question. It is a national security question. So I don't think.
Okay, but
that,
still, I mean, is Moscow interested in letting
from China or even?
Is Moscow interested at all in letting President Trump lead the way, as he seems to have indicated he will do, as far as bringing peace to the region and ending the war is concerned?
Well, I don't see any other way to settle the situation in a peaceful manner and don't continue the killing on the battlefield between Ukrainian proxy of American political decision, American ammunition, American rockets, and proxy is Ukrainians who are fighting Russian military forces.
Okay.
I don't think that it will continue very long. I don't think.
Okay. Peter, go ahead. I know you've been waiting to comment.
Yeah, I was starting to say this, but once again, the key players of the Trump administration, including J.D. Vance, including others, and most recently Mike Waltz, the incoming national security advisor, have said time and again that it's time to end this war. Donald Trump has said that. They're already commenting on this decision by Biden to allow Ukraine to use long-range attack as a bad decision, as a negative, as an escalatory decision. So that leads me to believe that there's some kind of a communication between the incoming administration of Donald Trump and Kremlin that goes back probably way before the actual election. And I suspect that Donald Trump, in his eagerness to be the peacemaker and also to follow up and make good on his promise to end the war within 24 hours, will actually try to bring Ukraine to the negotiating table as quickly as possible, which means under very unfavorable conditions for Ukraine, which would mean essentially a no to NATO for at least 20 years. That's being talked about. Recognizing new territorial realities, as Russia calls it, meaning recognizing Russia's land grabs, and finally reducing its standing army, to a symbolic figure of 70,000, essentially capitulating, essentially ceding sovereignty. That could be Donald Trump's plan. I hope it's not, but
Okay.
that is a concern in Ukraine.
Yeah, Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't share those concerns. I've read those same statements. The fact is, we have to accept, just from the very beginning, that Russia is a poor, impoverished country. It is not taken seriously. Donald Trump does not respect it. Let's start with this. Despite his first term, he did try to seek better relations. Russia is a country that has no ability to do anything besides regional warfare, such as it's doing with its neighbor, which illegally invaded. Hence why Vladimir Putin is a wanted war criminal internationally and has arrest warrants for him. Aside from, kidnapping Ukrainian children and deporting them to Russia, Russia has no actual ability to pose a threat to a country such as the United States or to any NATO country. That's quite clear. And so at this point, I think what's going to go ahead is that Donald Trump surely will try to end this war. I think that he will find very quickly that the Russians are dishonest, as they've been dishonest brokers throughout this whole war. And when he finds that, I have no doubt that he will, as U.S. foreign policy would dictate, be happy to help Russia be thrown back to the Stone Age as it continues to cooperate with our enemies, such as North Korea, Iran, and China, and against Western civilization. Russia is a global threat, and increasingly the American people and public polling recognize that. Fortunately, I think that this mistake of bringing North Koreans to go fight for Russia was a huge mistake. It shifted U.S. public opinion drastically. And so I think what's going to happen next is going to be something that will be in the best interest of the United States. And what is Russia's interest or non-interest is totally unimportant to everybody that's involved.
I mean, Jason, Russia doesn't really have interests beyond the region. That's what it's always gone after, you know, from Georgia, taking Georgian territory, to what it's doing now in Ukraine. And in the end, the U.S. has always said, don't do it, don't go there, we will stop you, we will, you know, fight on the side of what's right. And the U.S. always seems to lose in that respect. Russia does get what it wants.
But that's not the case. Look in the past year or 2 years, look at Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. The governments that were elected there were overthrown after having consultations with Wagner-like groups or trainings in Moscow. Look at the Venezuelan dictatorship.
But that's just sending mercenaries.
I
mean, that's not truly what Russia's...
governments make changes.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Nicaragua, look at Cuba. I think we can look further. We can look at the cooperation in the international trade of arms, as well as the international trade of black market goods, where Russia does play a hand. The washing of illegal money that operates with drug cartels in Latin America. No, in fact, Russia does have a global imprint. And they say that it's local or regional is simply not the case.
The global imprint is one thing, but it's what it wants regionally is where it will take the more aggressive action. I mean, Vyacheslav, let me ask you if you think, Russians have said this many times before, that the United States often underestimates Russian power, influence, and its rate of success in its foreign interventions, if we can call it that. Is that what you're seeing now?
The United States have not any plan to conquer Russia, because what has happened in Ukraine, it is the efforts of the United States for domination, to keep domination. And that's why they refuse to accept Russian offer to conclude the agreement on national security guarantees in December 21. And I think that the best proof that Russia has no aggressive intention towards Ukraine is the agreement, the Istanbul agreement between Lavrov and Kuleba, who was foreign minister of the Ukraine, who signed, presumably, signed the agreement between Russia and Ukraine on keeping peace, on ending military action. Who was against this agreement? Peaceful agreement. Those who wanted domination. Boris Johnson, who was the prime minister, who was the first who refused to support or demanded from Zelensky to cancel this agreement and up to the full well, the end of Russia. And Blinken, State Secretary of the United States, supported him. So West, who wanted to destroy Russia, it's the view from the Russian side. And they accusing us for conquering Ukraine? No. I cannot agree with this, even as a citizen, as a Russian citizen.
Jason,
I can political analyst.
I can see you weren't necessarily comfortable with that analysis, but please let me come back to Peter, because Peter, you were rolling your eyes even much earlier on. Go ahead, your response to.
I was just gonna say, Andrea, we've engaged on your program with various representatives of the Russian government, whether acting or in retirement, and every time my head is about to explode, you know, this topsy-turvy alternative reality world that they're trying to present. Well, the gentleman from Moscow just, you know, when he talked about these Istanbul agreements, that's precisely the scenario that I described earlier. That would mean a severely curtailed curtailed sovereignty of Ukraine, sort of like what happened in Belarus. Ukraine does not want to be Belarus. Ukraine wants to be a European Union member. And that's what Russia cannot contemplate. It cannot contemplate a fellow Eastern Slavic people to have an alternative lifestyle. That presents, as Kremlin sees, a mortal danger when it comes to the realm of ideas. Of course, it's nonsense to say Ukraine ever presented a clear and present military danger to Russia. And the gentleman from Moscow is all of a sudden claiming that, the West is hell-bent on dominating Russia. Well, why did you go into Ukraine and create all these problems? Who started this whole process? I mean, let's not try to rewrite history. It's plain for all to see. Vladimir Putin, when he announced war on Ukraine on the 24th February 2022, opened that Pandora's box.
Okay.
That was his doing and no one else's.
Let me just finish then with Jason quickly. We're down to our last few minutes. We have a harsh winter looming. It's already started. We have two populations that are getting very war-weary after over 1,000 days of conflict now. I would say both sides on the ground would like to get this over with as quickly as possible. The question is, how much worse does it have to get before it gets better? When we talk about Zelensky's new 10-point resilience plan, how much resilience can either side really have after almost 3 years?
Well, I'm sure that there can be quite a bit of resilience, to be frank, on both sides. I'm not really worried about the Ukrainian or Russian side. If you want to talk about the resilience to be able to continue, I'm sure both sides could if they wish to. I think what is much more probable to occur in the near term is the start of negotiations, which Donald Trump has put such an emphasis on. I think that is something that his administration is very interested to continue immediately. And so I think that's probably going to be the biggest game changer in this. But again, I think that Russia is doing itself no favors in this very short period of time before Trump takes office to have done so many things that show that they just don't care, they don't respect him. And I think they perhaps interpret this as showing strength. In fact, it's being interpreted quite the opposite. It's being interpreted in the United States as desperation, that the North Koreans have to come save the Russians. I mean, it's sort of funny. And imagine that any country would want to dominate Russia. I can't imagine something as absurd as that. I mean, have you seen what Russia looks like? Why would we want that? I don't know any country that would want to be occupying Russia. That's a joke. It's quite actually funny to hear the ambassador say that.
Peter, 30 seconds. How much resilience is really left, though?
People are worn out on both sides. Obviously, Ukrainians are, but I'll tell you this. Putin, once again, is up to his old tricks with these barrages of missile strikes and deaths of people. Sumy, Odessa, every time that happens, that brings back the resilience. That brings back the desire for vengeance. So we're in this spiral, and I agree with Jason. No side is willing to back down.
Okay. Not leaving it on the most optimistic note, but unfortunately that has been the trend of the last 1,001 days now. So unfortunately that'll have to be the last word for this edition of our program. I'd like to thank all three of you so much for being with us. Our viewers, of course, for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on X, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has signed a revised nuclear doctrine, declaring that a conventional attack on Russia by any nation that is supported by nuclear power will be considered a joint attack on his country. Putin's endorsement of the new nuclear deterrent policy comes on the 1,000th day after he sent troops into Ukraine. It also follows U.S. President Joe Biden's decision to let Ukraine strike targets inside Russia with U.S.-supplied long-range missiles. The signing of the doctrine reflects Putin's readiness to threaten use of the country's nuclear arsenal to force the West to back down as Moscow presses a slow-moving offensive in Ukraine.
Вибачте, без зайвих деталей. У України є далекобійні можливості, у України є далекобійні дрони свого власного виробництва. У нас тепер є довгий Нептун і не один. І тепер у нас є Атакамс. І ми все це будемо використовувати.
То, что атакам сегодня ночью по Брянской области использовался неоднократно, это, конечно, сигнал о том, что они хотят эскалацию. И без американцев использовать эти ракеты высокотехнологичные, Путин об этом многократно говорил, невозможно. We are strongly in favor of doing everything not to allow nuclear war to happen. It was us who first, during the Soviet Union times, suggested to the United States, and President Gorbachev and President Reagan made a joint statement that nuclear war can never be won and never must be started. The update of the military doctrine does not add anything which the West wouldn't know, and does not add anything which would be different, let me put it this way, from the American doctrinal documents on what to do with nuclear weapons. We are convinced that the nuclear weapon is first and foremost a weapon to constrain any, prevent any nuclear war.
So Ukraine reportedly uses the long-range missile for the first time to blow up Russian weapon facility as Putin issues nuclear warning to America. And Rob, if you have the clip, is this the clip of Ukraine attacking Russia?
This is Russia using the ICBM last night into Ukraine.
They're saying it looks like, and mind you, I worked at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana, ICBM missile site. This is what it would look like at night. They're saying that he's doing it to show force with obviously nothing, no warhead on it, but just they're saying that this might be him showing like you guys
firing off,
but
there is no warhead.
There's no warhead on it. Oh yeah, you would know, dude. That noise.
No warhead in it. If there was a warhead, it's a different story.
The cameras, this guy's gone. They're all gone.
This is last night.
Oh, that's fear. You hear the fear? It's. I'm telling people.
Rob, where is this? It's still causing damage.
Oh,
but
it's
not
causing
the damage of a nuclear bomb, obviously.
Pat, if it was a nuclear warhead, that first wave, this guy would have felt the impact that he's done. Yeah. That's scary.
So that's this taking place, and then you have Putin that comes out.
That's wild, man.
Putin comes out.
Sounds like an airplane, doesn't it?
Sounds like an airplane. These are the ones at nighttime, Rob.
I saw this one.
Yeah.
Go and play this clip, Rob.
Sounds like Boeing testing 737s.
Yeah. See,
there's three of them. I saw the.
This is what I was talking about it looking like it's a ICBM.
This is where this is in Ukraine.
This is just fast. This is the fast. The fast forward part of it, but that's what they would look like, guys. That's when that type of stuff is happening. It's like.
So while this is going on, you hear Putin allows nuke response to U.S. missile as he signs off on World War III escalation. What does that mean? He signs off on World War III escalation. Let me read it to you. So Putin updated Russia's nuclear doctrine to permit nuclear retaliation against the West if Ukraine fires long-range missiles into Russian territory and move into Kremlin's Dmitry Peskov's confirmed as targeting aggression with the use of conventional weapons following the U.S. approval for Ukraine to use these weapons 190 miles. Peskov warranted this policy reserves the right to use nuclear weapons and marks a significant escalation in the conflict. Vinny, what else do you know about this story?
Well, here's the thing. Look at it. Let's not forget about the timing. How many more days does Joe Biden have, Tom? How many?
20 in January, 31 in December, and about 8 right now.
Okay, and it was his birthday yesterday. He's 82 years old.
60 days.
60 days left. Okay, and let's just be honest. First, he is not making any decisions. Every headline that we see about Biden did this, Biden did that. Let's all agree it's not Joe Biden. Okay, and let's remember the Biden administration started this war. They knew Russia would invade when we were publicly pushed Zelensky to join NATO. Let's all be completely honest. That's what they all want. The left and a lot of these Republicans on the right. And let's not forget on January 9th, Biden addressed, that address that he did, Tom, where he said, if Russia, he said, Russia will be held accountable if it invades. And it depends on what it does. If it's one thing, if it's a minor incursion, we won't really do anything. This is Joe Biden inviting Russia to invade Ukraine, okay? And then he basically attacked them and like openly talking about expanding NATO. Because I wanted to ask you guys, if right now, I'm just going to pick somewhere, China wanted to build set up shop in Mexico, what would we do, Pat? I'm just asking you guys. What would we do if they came and they're like, hey, listen, we're going to go to Mexico. We're going to put up a couple of missiles.
I mean, like Cuban Missile Crisis.
That's what
Kennedy said, get your crap out of Cuba. It's too close to me.
Yeah, and what almost happened?
Well, yeah, we almost launched missiles, went to war, but they blinked and they pulled the missiles out of Cuba.
Yeah, and here's the problem. We're not even able to hear what Russia is saying because remember, the EU banned the platforming of Russian media. RT News and Sputnik, we can't even see what they're saying. They pulled out all the way that we could communicate or even talk to these
So this guy sent me a minect,
Yeah.
okay? And he's leaning towards a Ukraine argument, Tom. And here's what he told me, okay?
Okay.
And Tom, I'm going to go to the U.S. Embassy closing in Kiev, and I want to get your thoughts on that as well here in a minute. But I want you to see what this guy said. Reasonable guy. I would like to offer a different perspective on the situation in Ukraine. After the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, Ukraine inherited a large portion of its nuclear arsenal, making it the third largest nuclear power at the time. Think about it. That's 33 years ago. Ukraine was number 3. 33 years ago, Ukraine's number 3 in the world.
In terms of total bombs.
In terms of total bombs, that's a freaking lot of power, right?
Of course.
Yes. So most people forget that in 94, Ukraine agrees to dismantle its nuclear arsenal in exchange for security assurances from Russia, the U.S., and the UK, formalized in the Budapest Memorandum. The process was strongly encouraged by the U.S. under President Bill Clinton. Imagine agreeing with a neighbor to give up your guns on the promise they'll protect you if danger arises. Later, their friends start shooting at you, and you're only given tools to protect your yard, not yourself. Now Russia strikes Ukraine weekly with hundreds of drones and rockets, targeting civilians in all cities, causing massive casualties. If this were a business deal, how important do you think the ethical aspects of such an agreement would be, and how would you handle this situation? Tom?
Well, it was Russia, the U.S., and U.K., I think, that were at the end of World War II, that were sitting there talking about Germany. Remember that? There's the three of them sitting there. And then later, Russia broke ranks and Germany, the Berlin Wall, and everything with it. So there is something to be said here, is that there was a treaty that was put in place, and then there's a couple things that happened. One, suddenly the U.S. and U.S. proxies in NATO were trying to get the Ukraine to join, and then Russia, who's in the treaty, goes, whoa, wait a minute. We have this treaty here. I told you I didn't want Ukraine in NATO. Russia has never wavered on not wanting Ukraine to be part of NATO. I thought we had a treaty here. So Russia feels that the West instigated NATO and pissed it off. The West is saying, dude, after the Soviet Union, you're just trying to rebuild everything back together. You're trying to put Humpty Dumpty together again, and you want Crimea specifically. You want the access to the Black Sea and all this. And so in terms of a business deal, it's like people on both sides messed with it, but then Russia went and got active on a military basis. They started not just lawsuits. They went after it.
What's your position on what he said? This message that he sent me.
Pat, this is where I'm coming from.
I think it's.
I know. I think
stay on this point. Stay on this point. What he's saying. So what he's saying is this is important because to some of the Ukraine. The other day I'm in a car in Orlando yesterday. We're driving. The driver's Russian. And I'm trying to kind of get a feel. I said, hey, do you work for the guys? Yes. So I said, I can't really openly talk to my employees about what we're thinking about doing with the event here. He said, I totally understand. I said, so where are you from, Russia? When did you leave 25 years ago? How's the situation? My brother's still living there. What happened when you came here? My husband and I are here. Our family's here. When's the last time you went to Russia? I haven't gone for 25 years. How do you feel about Putin? He says, I loved Putin 2 years ago. Everybody hates Putin right now in Russia. Why is that? Everyone's afraid of him. Why do they afraid of him? Because he's become a dictator. So I'm thinking this girl is going to be a pro-Ukraine liberal type of person. I said, so how do you feel about Trump? She says, well, I know I can talk to you. We love him. I said, who loves him? He says, everybody in Russia loves Trump. I said, well, so let me get this straight. Russians right now are upset with Putin, but they love Trump? Yes. Why? He says, imagine if your kids died for a war that you don't want to be a part of, and there's a guy that can come and stop the war. So the position he's taken, she was a pro-Trump, anti-Putin because they just want people to stop dying.
Yeah, they want
What
peace.
an interesting perspective. This is a reasonable person we're talking to, right? But this guy is saying, hey, man, what the hell? We made a deal in 1991, 33 years ago. We gave you everything. We were number 3 in the world. We could have been a force to be reckoned with. And now you're attacking us? What's that all about? What do you say to that guy?
Who's he saying that's attacking him?
He's saying now we're defending, we're okay with Russia attacking Ukraine, and you're allowing that war happen. Why is Russia attacking Ukraine? Their job was to defend us because we gave all our nuclear weapons. I have an argument. I want to know what you think about it.
I honestly, it hits me.
Okay. Vinny, Adam, what would you say to that?
So you don't need to play the video. It'll be important to show these images. I was just in Washington, D.C. It was the 1,000th day anniversary, so to speak, of the Ukraine-Russian war. And I said, listen, I have this opportunity to speak with Ukrainian soldiers in front of the White House. Let me seize the moment here, right? So I speak with this guy. I don't know if you have the other video as well. Interviewing actual soldiers. One of the guys had his limbs blown off. He's in a wheelchair. But there's American flags. There's Ukrainian flags. I'm like, hey, guys, I just want to ask you guys some questions, see what you got going on here. Here's my biggest takeaways from this. I believe that Donald Trump has the ability to win a Nobel Peace Prize if he can end this war. And he said on record he believes that he can stop the war and possibly before he even takes office, right? He said that. By the way, do you know Barack Obama won a Nobel Peace Prize? Do you know how soon into his presidency he won a Nobel Peace Prize?
2 months?
I think it was 270 days. I think it was like immediately after he took office.
Somehow Tom knows this ridiculous number. It was 9 months into him taking office.
Yeah.
9 months.
Yeah.
And he won it on the inspiration of hope, not because he did anything per se, because he was inspiring hope. So it was
and a
on
big speech at the Berlin Wall.
There it was. So some of his accomplishments were he was strengthening international diplomacy. Some may say he was doing an apology tour for America, right? He was encouraging nuclear disarmaments, even though it didn't necessarily begin at that point. And he was, again, renewing the climate of hope. So he came in with this hope and change, but nothing necessarily is manufactured. But it's now officially the 1,000th day. I think we're on
What are you
1,001.
saying to this guy? We were on this topic.
So here's
What's
my
your point with this guy?
After interviewing this guy, I said, what do you think should happen in the war? And he was the spokesperson. He goes, Putin is Hitler, this whole talking point. I'm like, Putin is Hitler? That's what you're giving me? And I said, a lot of people in America have heard this about Trump. Trump's Hitler, Trump's Hitler. The whole Hitler thing, it's being watered down and it's basically being marginalized. Hitler killed 6 million Jews.
Adam, what is the point with this guy saying the fact that stay on this point? You just went 3 topics that we could have gone later.
I didn't really necessarily know what this guy's point is. I have a point though.
But no, it's your point on this point. I'll come back to
What would you like me to respond to exactly?
You didn't hear anything I said?
I
did. Read it twice.
I did.
Okay, so what do you have to say about what the guy says?
I think that I don't even know what this guy said.
Okay, so then hang tight. I'll come back to you on the point you're making. I understand the point you were trying to make about nuclear, the nuclear, what do you call it? The Nobel Prize for him to get because of what he could do. I agree.
Why is this guy's point so important?
The reason why, because there is a split where some people are like, well, are you okay with this happening, et cetera, et cetera. This happened at a different time that the negotiation took place, in 91. Putin's sitting there saying, that was your mistake. Why would you even do that in the first place? You should have never given it up. You gave it up for exchange. That was your bad negotiation. So if you had a leader that negotiated in a weak way for your country, you pay a price for that. You voted for that person. You guys chose to give that up. You didn't have to give it up, right? You didn't have to do that. And then at the same side, when some of the Ukrainians are like, well, what do you want them to do? Well, gradually, these guys have been getting closer and closer to NATO, so both ways promises are not being kept. If your promise was you're not going to go be part of NATO, and now you're pursuing it, and then they're going to be like, if you're not holding the end of the bargain of you not even getting close to NATO, you are getting close to NATO, you are getting close to all these guys, anything we ever negotiated in the past is over with. Anything we negotiated in the past is over with. That's the point with what this guy is saying. He's saying that it's not fair what took place. One,